They tried to expel humans, then Earth made a galactic announcement part. The great hall of the Nexus Spire shimmered under the twin suns of Viridia Prime. Tall, slender beings from dozens of star systems stood in quiet rows, their forms wrapped in robes of woven light or armored shells depending on their kind. At the center of it all, seated on a raised dais of polished obsidian, sat Ambassador Vexor of the Cathar Dominion. His silver eyes scanned the chamber without blinking. He had waited a long time for this moment. For over 50 Earth years, humanity had been a problem. Not because they were strong, they were not. Not compared to the fleets of the Concord. Not because they were wise, they often acted without thinking. But because they were unpredictable. Humans built ships out of scrap metal and flew them into storms of plasma just to see what would happen. They talked to enemies instead of shooting them. They laughed during funerals and cried during victories. To the orderly, logic-driven species of the Galactic Concord, this made no sense. Worse, it was dangerous. The final straw came 3 months earlier. A human freighter, the Dawn Chaser, had drifted into a quarantine zone near the ruins of Xylos 7. The zone was sealed because of unstable quantum decay, a hazard that could erase entire star systems if disturbed. The Concord Patrol ordered the ship to turn back. Instead, the human captain, a woman named Maya Ruiz, sent a message. "We're just checking if your warning signs are real." Then she dropped a probe into the anomaly. Nothing exploded. Nothing vanished. But the probe returned with data that rewrote 3 chapters of Concord astrophysics. That was the problem. Humans didn't follow rules. They tested them. And sometimes they were right. Now Vexor rose. His voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the hall without amplification, a trait of his species. "The Concord has debated long enough," he said. "Humanity's presence beyond their home system is a threat to galactic stability. Their colonies on Mars, Titan, and the Belt operate without proper oversight. Their ships travel where they please. Their scientists tamper with forces they barely understand." A murmur rose from the crowd. Some agreed. Others shifted uncomfortably. The Mirkai delegate, a 6-limbed insectoid with iridescent wings, clicked its mandibles in concern. It had traded with humans before. They paid fairly and never broke a deal. But it said nothing. The Concord valued unity over dissent. Vexor continued. "Therefore, by unanimous vote of the High Council, we decree the following. All human settlements outside the Sol system must be dismantled within 1 standard cycle. All human vessels are to return to Earth orbit and remain there. Any violation will be met with immediate quarantine and, if necessary, force." The words hung in the air like cold smoke. No one cheered. No one protested. The decision was final. On Mars Colony Theta, Leo Carter sat in the mess hall spooning lukewarm synth stew into his mouth. He was 24, with messy brown hair and grease stains on his jumpsuit. He worked in the lower maintenance tunnels fixing air recyclers and water pumps. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even important. But when the Concord broadcast began on every screen in the colony, he stopped chewing. The image of Vexor filled the wall. The translation software turned his words into plain English. Leo listened, his stomach tightening. Beside him, Maya Ruiz, yes, the same Maya from the Dawn Chaser, slammed her tray down. She was on leave, recovering from a minor radiation burn on her forearm. Her dark eyes burned hotter than the burn. "They think we're just going to pack up and leave?" she said, her voice low but sharp. Leo didn't answer right away. He thought of his sister, who taught school in the dome over Valles Marineris. He thought of Old Man Harris, who grew real potatoes in Hydroponics Bay 3. He thought of the kids who played zero-gravity tag in the cargo bays. This wasn't just a colony. It was home. Across the solar system, others watched too. On Luna, dock workers paused as the announcement played over the loudspeakers. In the icy labs of Titan, researchers exchanged worried glances. Even on Earth, in cities from Denver to Mumbai, people gathered around public screens, stunned into silence. The United Earth government issued no statement, no angry reply, no promise of resistance, just silence. That silence scared people more than any warfleet. Back on Mars, Maya stood up. "I'm not leaving," she said. Leo looked up at her. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I know this. If they want us gone, they'll have to drag us out." That night, whispers spread through the colony. Not of fear, but of something else, defiance. In the tunnels, in the greenhouses, in the quiet corners of the comms room, people began talking. Not about running, about staying. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean in a sealed research facility known only as Site 9, Dr. Eli Dawson stared at a holographic display. He was a quiet man in his late 40s with thinning hair and tired eyes. He had spent 20 years working on a project so secret even most world leaders didn't know its full purpose. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a shield. It was something older, stranger, and far more powerful than either. He glanced at the clock. The Concord's deadline had just begun. One standard cycle, about 365 Earth days, was all they had. Eli sighed and typed a command into his console. Somewhere deep in the Earth's crust, ancient machines hummed to life. Far above, on the surface of Mars, Leo looked out the observation window at the red plains stretching to the horizon. Stars glittered in the black sky. Among them were ships, Concord ships, already moving into position, watching, waiting. He didn't know what Earth was planning. He didn't know if anyone was coming to help. But he knew one thing for sure. Humans had never backed down from a challenge. Not when they crawled out of caves. Not when they sailed across oceans. And not now when the whole galaxy was telling them to go home. The silence from Earth wasn't weakness. It was the calm before something new, and Leo, like millions of others, could feel it coming. They tried to expel humans. Then Earth made a galactic announcement part. 2 weeks passed after the Concord's ultimatum, and still Earth said nothing. No angry speeches. No fleet movements. No emergency broadcasts. Just silence. To the rest of the galaxy it looked like surrender. But on Earth and in every human outpost from Luna to the edge of the Kuiper Belt, people knew better. Silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. On Mars Colony Theta, life went on, but not normally. Security patrols doubled. Comms traffic was rerouted through encrypted channels. Supplies that used to come from Earth now came from hidden stockpiles buried under the rust-colored dunes. Leo Carter noticed the changes right away. The air felt heavier, like before a storm. He still fixed air recyclers, but now he did it with a sidearm clipped to his belt. A standard-issue pulse pistol, just in case. Maya Ruiz had been recalled to active duty. She spent her days in flight simulators, running drills with other pilots. They didn't practice dogfights or bombing runs. Instead, they rehearsed something strange, flying in perfect formation while broadcasting low-frequency pulses. No one explained why. Orders came from Earth Command and questions weren't welcome. One evening, Leo found Maya in the observation lounge staring at the stars. She looked tired. "They're watching us," she said without turning. "Concord scouts. Always just outside sensor range." Leo nodded. "Do you think they'll attack before the deadline?" "I hope not," she said. "Because if they do, we're not ready." But Earth wasn't waiting to be ready for war. It was getting ready for something else. Deep beneath the Atlantic in Site 9, Dr. Eli Dawson stood before a massive chamber filled with humming rings of silver metal. This was the heart of the Helios Array, a project begun in secret after first contact with the Mirkai 30 years ago. Back then, humans realized they couldn't compete with alien tech through weapons or speed, so they looked inward. They studied what made humanity unique, not strength but connection. Not logic alone, but emotion, art, memory, and meaning. The Helios Array wasn't a weapon. It was a voice, a way to speak not just with words but with feelings, with history, with the raw truth of what it meant to be human. The array used quantum resonance to encode data, not just facts but experiences. A child's laugh, a soldier's last letter, the smell of rain on dry soil. All of it could be woven into a signal that any sentient mind could understand, no matter their biology. Eli had tested it once, on a captured Zarn neural node. The alien machine had shut down for 3 hours, overloaded by the emotional weight of a single lullaby. That was when he knew it would work. Now, with the deadline looming, the final pieces were falling into place. Power cores in Antarctica, signal relays on the far side of the moon, harmonic stabilizers in orbit around Jupiter, all were syncing to Earth's core frequency. The whole planet was becoming a speaker. Meanwhile, strange orders came down from Earth Command. Not to soldiers, but to engineers, artists, teachers, farmers, and musicians. People from every walk of life were quietly summoned. Some were flown to underground bases. Others boarded unmarked shuttles heading for the Oort cloud. No one was told why. Only that their skills were needed. Leo got his orders on a Tuesday morning. A sealed message appeared on his work tablet. Report to Dock 7. Transport departing in 6 hours. Bring only personal ID and standard gear. He showed it to Maya. She frowned. Dock 7? That's where the deep-range haulers go. Are they sending you to Titan? I don't know, Leo said. 6 hours later, he stood in the cold metal corridor of the transport ship Aurora. Around him were others, men and women in plain uniforms, faces tight with uncertainty. Some carried toolkits, others had data slates or medical kits. No soldiers, no weapons visible, just people. At the ramp, a woman with short red hair checked his ID. Name? Leo Carter, she nodded and stepped aside. Welcome aboard. Inside, the ship was quiet. No chatter, no jokes, just the low hum of engines warming up. Leo found a seat near a window and watched Mars shrink behind them. He wondered if he'd ever see it again. The Aurora didn't head for Titan or Luna. It turned outward, past Jupiter, past Neptune, into the dark sea of the outer system. Days passed. Food was simple. Sleep came in shifts. No one asked where they were going. They all knew better. Finally, the ship slowed near a cluster of icy rocks at the edge of the solar system. There, hidden among the comets, floated a massive structure, part station, part sculpture, made of black alloy and glowing veins of blue light. It looked ancient, but it was brand new. Built in secret over the last decade, this was Helios Station. Leo and the others boarded in silence. Inside, the air smelled clean, sterile. Corridors led to labs, control rooms, and vast chambers filled with strange machinery. At the center of it all stood Dr. Eli Dawson, looking older than his years but calm. You're here because Earth chose you, he told the group that night in the main hall. Not for your strength, but for your humanity. Each of you carries something the galaxy has never seen, not just knowledge, but feeling, memory, hope. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Over the next weeks, they worked. Leo helped calibrate resonance coils. A baker from Chicago taught the AI how to simulate the smell of fresh bread. A retired schoolteacher from Oregon recorded stories for the Cultural Archive. A fisherman from Alaska described the sound of ice cracking in spring. Everything was being saved. Everything was being prepared. Back on Earth, cities grew quieter. People walked with purpose. There were no protests, no panic, just a quiet determination. Children still went to school. Farmers still planted crops. But everyone knew something big was coming. The Concord noticed the calm too. Their spies reported no military buildup, no weapons factories running overtime, just normal life. It confused them. Vexer demanded answers, but his advisors had none. How could a species facing extinction act so calm? What they didn't understand was that humans weren't preparing to fight. They were preparing to speak. And when Earth finally broke its silence, the whole galaxy would listen, not with ears, but with hearts. On Helios Station, Leo stood at a viewport one night watching the stars. He thought of his sister on Mars. He thought of Maya, probably flying some secret mission near Saturn. He thought of his parents, still in their little house in Colorado, tending their garden like nothing was wrong. He didn't know if the plan would work, but he knew one thing. If humanity was going to be erased, it wouldn't go quietly. It would leave a mark so deep, so true that no galaxy could ever forget it. And soon, very soon, Earth would speak. They tried to expel humans. Then Earth made a Galactic Announcement part. 3. The day the Concorde's deadline ended began like any other on Viridia Prime. Ambassador Vexer rose early, dressed in his formal robes, and reviewed the latest fleet positions. Human colonies had not moved. No ships had returned to Earth orbit. The humans had defied the order. That meant only one thing: enforcement. Vexer gave the command. Conquered warships shifted from observation to blockade. Patrols tightened around Mars, Titan, and the asteroid belt. Orders were clear. No violence unless provoked, but no human vessel was to leave or enter Sol space. The expulsion would happen, with or without human cooperation. But as the first Conquered cruiser powered its containment field near Mars orbit, something unexpected happened. Every screen in the galaxy flickered, not just comms panels or public displays. Every device capable of receiving a signal, from warship bridges to children's learning tablets, even the neural implants of telepathic species. A soft hum filled the air, low and warm, like wind through trees. Then came the light, not blinding, but gentle, golden. as if the sun itself had leaned closer to speak. Earth had broken its silence. On Helios Station, Leo Carter stood in the central chamber, hands gripping the edge of a console. Around him, engineers held their breath. Dr. Eli Dawson stood at the main control node, eyes closed, as if listening to a song only he could hear. The Helios array was live. The signal was flowing. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a threat. It was a gift. The transmission carried no words at first. Just music. A simple piano piece played by a girl in a small town in Iowa. Then came images. A baby's first steps. An old man planting an oak tree. A group of strangers sharing food after an earthquake. These weren't recordings. They were feelings encoded in quantum harmonics, translated directly into the minds of every listener. On the bridge of a Cathar destroyer, a young officer named Jorik suddenly saw his own childhood, not his, but a human child's, running through a field of wheat under a blue sky. He gasped, his hands trembled. For the first time, he understood what home truly meant. In the Nexus spire, Vexer clutched his chest as wave after wave of human memory crashed into him. He saw a soldier writing a letter to his daughter before battle. He felt the joy of a scientist discovering a cure. He tasted bread baked by hands that had known hunger. He wept, not from pain, but from awe. The signal didn't stop. It grew deeper. It showed humanity's failures too, wars, greed, cruelty. But it also showed what came after. Forgiveness, rebuilding, trying again. That was the core of the message. Humans were flawed, yes, but they never stopped reaching for better. On Mars Colony Theta, Maya Ruiz stood in the command center, watching the Concorde ships outside freeze in place. Their weapons powered down. Their comms channels filled not with orders, but with silence, then with soft, confused voices. One Zarn pilot broadcast in broken English. Why? Why show us this? Maya didn't answer. She just looked at the stars and whispered, "Because you needed to see us." Back on Earth, people gathered in streets, parks, and rooftops. They didn't cheer. They stood together, quiet, as if holding their breath. In Denver, Leo's parents held hands on their porch, tears on their cheeks. In Mumbai, school children sat cross-legged in a courtyard, eyes wide as the signal painted colors in their minds. The Helios array wasn't broadcasting outward. It was resonating inward, through the fabric of space itself. It bypassed language, bypassed species, and spoke directly to consciousness. Even the Mirkai, who communicated through scent and vibration, understood. Their hive mind pulsed with new patterns, human songs woven into their ancient dances. On Helios Station, Eli finally opened his eyes. "It's working," he said softly. Leo turned to him. "Will they listen?" Eli smiled. "They already are." The signal lasted for exactly 12 hours. In that time, no ship fired a shot. No order was given. The entire galaxy simply paused. When it ended, silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence. Not empty, but full of questions, full of wonder. On Viridia Prime, Vexer stood alone in his quarters. The weight of what he had seen pressed on him like gravity. He had judged humans as chaotic, dangerous, reckless. But now he saw the truth. Their chaos was creativity. Their danger was courage. Their recklessness was hope. He activated his private comms line. "Recall all enforcement vessels," he said, "and prepare a new council session. We have much to discuss." Meanwhile, on a small transport near Saturn, Maya received a new message. It was from Earth Command, but it wasn't coded. It was simple, and stand by. The next move is theirs. She leaned back in her seat, staring at the rings of Saturn glowing in the distance. For the first time in months, she felt calm. Across the solar system, humans waited, not with weapons ready, but with open hands. They had shown the galaxy who they were, not through force, but through truth, and the galaxy, for the first time, was listening. In the quiet that followed, something new began to grow. Not fear, not anger, but curiosity. Species that had never spoken to humans before sent tentative signals. The Veln, ocean dwellers from the Andromeda Arm, broadcast a pattern of light that mimicked Van Gogh's Starry Night. The Mirkai sent a data packet filled with human music they had secretly collected for years. Earth didn't reply right away. It didn't need to. The message had been sent. The door was open. On Helios Station, Leo looked out at the endless dark and thought of his sister on Mars. He hoped she had felt it too. The warmth, The connection, the proof that they mattered. They hadn't fought. They hadn't begged. They had simply shared what they were, and in doing so, they had changed everything. They tried to expel humans, then Earth made a galactic announcement part. For in the days after Earth's signal faded, the galaxy did not return to normal. Normal had changed. The conquered, once united in its judgment of humanity, now trembled with doubt and wonder. Delegates who had voted for expulsion sat in their quarters replaying fragments of the transmission in their minds. A Cathar elder wept over a human lullaby. A Zarn strategist canceled a weapons drill to listen to a recording of rain on a tin roof. Something deep inside them had shifted, and they could not ignore it. The first to speak openly was the Mirakai envoy, a being named Keswick. During a closed council session, it uncurled its 6 limbs and projected a soft chime through the chamber's translator. "We have traded with humans for 17 cycles," it said. "They never lied. They never stole. When our young were lost in the methane storms of Grix 9, a human freighter turned back to find them. They gave us warmth when our ships froze. We did not tell you because we feared your judgment. But now we ask, why did we ever fear humans at all?" Silence followed. Then murmurs. Then voices. The Veln, aquatic beings who communicated through pulses of colored light, sent a live broadcast from their ocean cities. Their coral towers now shimmered with patterns copied from human paintings, swirls of blue and gold that echoed Van Gogh, sharp lines that mirrored Picasso. Their message was simple: show us more. On Mars Colony Theta, Maya Ruiz watched the Veln broadcast with Ben Carter, Leo's older brother and her co-pilot. Ben, usually quiet and steady, wiped his eyes without shame. "They're learning our art," he said. "Not our weapons." "Our art," Maya nodded. "That's what scared them before. Not that we'd attack, but that we'd change them." Back on Earth, Dr. Eli Dawson stood before a global audience for the first time. He wore a plain gray shirt, no medals, no uniform. He spoke in calm, simple words. "We did not send that signal to win," he said. "We sent it to share. Humanity is not perfect. We have made terrible mistakes. But we also build hospitals in war zones. We send probes to stars we'll never reach. We write poems about love and loss and hope. That is who we are. And we offer it, not as a weapon, but as a hand reaching out." His words spread fast, not just across Earth, but through every species that had received the signal. For the first time, humans were not seen as invaders or upstarts. They were seen as teachers, as dreamers, as fellow travelers in a vast and lonely universe. The Conquered's unity cracked further. Younger species, those who had grown up hearing only warnings about humans, now demanded answers. Why had they been kept from this? Why had the Council hidden human music, human stories, human kindness? Protests formed on a dozen worlds. Not violent ones, peaceful gatherings where beings held up images of Earth's oceans, forests and cities, asking to see them for themselves. Vexer, once the strongest voice for expulsion, now sat alone in his chambers reviewing old human films. He watched a story about a man who forgave his enemy. He listened to a symphony written during a time of plague. He began to understand. Humans did not conquer with fleets. They conquered with feeling. And that was far more powerful. On Helios Station, Leo helped integrate new data streams from curious alien species. They weren't asking for tech specs or military plans. They asked for recipes, for bedtime stories, for instructions on how to grow flowers in low gravity. Leo recorded a short video showing how to fix a leaky pipe using duct tape and wire, a skill he'd learned from his father. Within hours, it was being studied by engineers on 3 different worlds. Earth's government, once silent, now opened its archives. Not just scientific data, but poetry, dance, folktales, and family photos. Every human child's drawing sent to school was scanned and shared. Every song sung in a shower was recorded and offered. The message was clear: this is us. All of us. Maya was reassigned. Not to a warship, but to a new vessel called the Horizon. A ship built not for battle, but for travel and teaching. Its crew included scientists, artists, and linguists. Their mission: to visit willing worlds and share human culture in person. Before departure, she visited Leo on Helios Station. They stood in the observation deck watching Jupiter's storm swirl in the distance. "I never thought I'd be a teacher," she said. "You always were," Leo replied. "You just used a ship instead of a chalkboard," she smiled. Meanwhile, on Earth, children began learning alien languages in school. Not for war, but for friendship. Farmers experimented with alien seeds. Musicians blended human instruments with sounds from the Mirkai and Veln. The world felt smaller, not because it had shrunk, but because it had opened. The Concord called an emergency session, not to enforce the expulsion, but to discuss a new proposal. Some delegates still resisted. They feared change. They feared losing control, but their voices grew quieter each day. Vexer stood before the council again, but this time his posture was different, humble. "We judged a species by its noise," he said, "but we should have listened to its song. The humans did not threaten us. They invited us, and if we refuse that invitation, we are the ones who will be left behind." His words carried weight. The council voted, not unanimously but with a strong majority, to suspend the expulsion order indefinitely. More than that, they proposed a new framework, the Earth Accords, a treaty not of surrender, but of sharing. On Luna, in a quiet garden under the dome of Tranquility Base, Maya and Ben stood with a group of young pilots. They weren't training for combat. They were learning how to greet beings from other worlds, how to share a meal, how to say thank you in 10 different languages. Leo, back on Mars for a short visit, walked through the colony with his sister. She held his hand like she did when they were kids. "Do you think they'll ever really understand us?" she asked. "They already do," he said. "They just needed to feel it." And across the stars, in cities of light and oceans of thought, the galaxy began to feel it too. Not as data, not as strategy, but as truth. Humans were not perfect, but they were real. And that was enough. They tried to expel humans, then Earth made a Galactic Announcement part. 1 year after the Concord's failed expulsion order, the galaxy looked different. Not because borders had changed or fleets had grown, but because minds had opened. The Earth Accords, signed in the shadow of Luna's Sea of Serenity, were not a treaty of power, but of partnership. Humans were no longer outsiders. They were part of the conversation. The signing ceremony was held on a clear night under Luna's dome. Delegates from over 100 species stood in a circle, not behind podiums or shields, but side by side. Vexer of the Cathar wore no armor, only a simple robe woven with threads of human silk. Beside him stood Keswick of the Mirkai, its wings shimmering with patterns copied from Navajo blankets. At the center of the circle stood Dr. Eli Dawson, calm as ever, holding a data crystal that contained not weapons codes, but a library of human kindness, stories of neighbors helping neighbors, of strangers becoming friends, of light found in the darkest times. Maya Ruiz watched from the edge of the crowd. Dressed in a new uniform, navy blue with silver trim, no weapons, only a small badge shaped like a rising sun, she wasn't there as a soldier. She was there as a bridge. Leo Carter stood nearby, having returned from Helios Station for the first time in months. He had helped design the cultural exchange modules now being sent to every conquered world. His hands, once used only for fixing pipes, had helped build something far more lasting: understanding. The Accords promised 3 things: open access to human archives, joint scientific missions beyond known space, and the right for humans to remain in their colonies without fear. In return, Earth agreed to share its greatest strength, not technology, but empathy. After the signing, there was no grand celebration, no fireworks or speeches. Instead, the delegates gathered in a garden built just for the occasion: real soil, real grass, real earth flowers blooming under artificial sunlight. A human musician played a soft tune on a wooden flute. A Veln delegate pulsed gentle blues and greens in time with the melody. A young Cathar child reached out and touched a daisy, then looked up with wide eyes. "It's soft," it whispered. That small moment meant more than any treaty. In the weeks that followed, change spread quietly. Human teachers traveled to Mirkai hives to share storytelling. Veln artists visited Earth's oceans to learn from coral reef divers. Cathar engineers worked with Leo's team to build water purifiers for drought-stricken colonies, using both alien alloys and human ingenuity. On Mars, the colony thrived. New greenhouses bloomed with plants from 3 worlds. Children played games that mixed human rules with alien logic. Maya's old ship, the Dawn Chaser, was retired. Not scrapped, but turned into a museum. Inside, visitors could sit in the cockpit and hear her voice explaining why she dropped that probe into the anomaly. Because, the recording said, sometimes you have to look closer to see the truth. Back on Earth, life returned to something like peace, but richer. Cities planted alien trees that glowed softly at night. Schools taught classes in universal harmony, not just math and science. Farmers grew crops that fed both humans and off-world guests. The world felt smaller, not because it had shrunk, but because it had grown bigger in heart. Eli Dawson rarely gave interviews now. When asked what he thought of the new era, he simply said, "We didn't win. We just reminded everyone that we're all trying to find our way home." One evening, Maya and Leo stood on a hill outside Denver, looking up at the stars. The sky was clear. No conquered ships hovered in warning. No blockades, just stars, some old, some new, all full of possibility. "They tried to kick us out," Maya said, her voice soft. Leo nodded. "And we showed them why the universe needs us, not despite our flaws, but because of them." She smiled. Funny how the quietest thing we ever did was the loudest. Far beyond the solar system, the Helios signal still traveled. It had reached star systems the conquered had never mapped. In a distant spiral arm, a young species just learning to speak picked up the echo of a child's laugh. They didn't understand the sound, but they felt its warmth. They saved it. They played it again and again, and when they built their first ship, they painted the hull with stars that looked like Van Gogh's. On Earth, children grew up knowing they belonged not just to a planet, but to a galaxy that finally saw them. They learned that strength wasn't in how hard you could hit, but in how deeply you could care. The conquered still met in the Nexus Spire, but the debates were different now. Instead of how do we control humans, they asked what can we learn from them. Vexer, once the voice of fear, now chaired a new committee, the Council of Shared Futures. Ben Carter, Maya's co-pilot, married a botanist from Titan who studied alien pollination. Their wedding was held under Mars's red sky, with guests from 6 species. The cake was made with earth wheat, Titan ice crystals, and Mirakai nectar. It tasted like hope. Leo never went back to fixing air recyclers full-time. He became a coordinator for the exchange program, helping match human skills with galactic needs. He once sent a retired baker from Chicago to teach bread making to a colony of methane breathers who had never tasted anything warm. The thank you message they sent back included a song made of bubbling gases and gratitude. Earth did not become the most powerful world in the galaxy. It did not seek to rule. It simply chose to be itself, messy, kind, curious, and brave. And in doing so, it gave others permission to be the same. The last official act of the old Concord was to rename itself. It was no longer the Galactic Concord. It became the Shared Accord, a union not of law, but of listening. And every year, on the anniversary of the signal, every world in the Accord played the same piece of music at the same time. That simple piano tune from Iowa. No words. No demands. Just a reminder that even in the vast dark, someone was singing. Maya flew her last mission not to a battlefield, but to a newly discovered world with oceans and twin moons. She carried seeds, books, and a recording of rain. When she landed, the native beings did not raise weapons. They raised hands, and she for the first time stepped onto alien soil not as a pilot, but as a friend. Back home, Leo looked at the stars and knew Earth's story was no longer just human. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt alone and dared to reach out. The galaxy had tried to silence humanity. Instead, it learned to listen. And in that listening, it found something it didn't know it was missing. Connection, not through force, not through fear, but through a single shared truth. We are all more alike than we are different. And that was enough.